Ladies and gentlemen, it is a great privilege and pleasure to introduce President Ronald Reagan, the President of the United States.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. No. Thank you. Thank you. General Goodpastor, Reverend clergy, General Means, the members of the United States Senate and House of Representatives were here, the officers on the platform, you, the family, the friends, the Corps, and above all, this graduating class. And Nancy and I consider it a great pleasure to be here today to congratulate you who have successfully completed your education and training at the United States Military Academy. I'm a little self-conscious being introduced as your commander when I began my military career as a second lieutenant in the cavalry, the horse cavalry, that is. I have threatened on occasion that that was the reason I got this job, was so that I could reinstitute that horse cavalry. But we honor you for the responsibility that you are willing to accept. Today you become officers in the armed forces of the United States, guardians of freedom, protectors of our heritage, but more than that, you become the keepers of the peace. Those shrill voices that would have us believe the defenders of our nation are somehow the enemies of peace are as false as they are shrill. A Chinese philosopher Sun Tzu, 2,500 years ago, said winning 100 victories in 100 battles is not the acme of skill. To subdue the enemy without fighting is the acme of skill. A truly successful army is one that, because of its strength and ability and dedication, will not be called upon to fight, for no one will dare to provoke it. There have been 4 wars in my lifetime. None of them came about because the United States was too strong. At the end of World War II, we alone were at the peak of our military strength. Our great industrial capacity was untouched by war's destruction. And it was then that, in those dark days, that Pope Pius XII said, America has a great genius for great and unselfish deeds. Into the hands of America, God has placed and afflicted mankind. We set out to restore the war-ravaged lands of our erstwhile enemies as well as our friends. We prevented what could have been a retreat into the Dark Ages. Unfortunately, another great power in the world was marching to a different drumbeat, creating a society in which everything that isn't compulsory is prohibited. The citizens in that society have little more to say about their government than a prison inmate has to say about the prison administration. About 10 days ago, I addressed the graduating class at the University of Notre Dame. Young men and women of your generation were facing a future in which they wonder what jobs will be available and who their employers will be. You don't have that problem. You know what your job will be, and your employers will be those Notre Dame graduates as well as the rest of your fellow citizens. Now, of course, they won't be directly and personally in charge. That's left to those of us that they've chosen to represent them. Secretary Marsh, who is here, Secretary of the Army, But speaking on behalf of all of the people, those employers of yours, may I say that we intend that you shall find better working conditions, tools adequate to the tasks you're expected to perform, and pay somewhat more commensurate with the responsibilities you assume than has been the case in recent years. Now, you may have heard rumors to the effect that increasing government spending is not something I'm prone to do. And to tell the truth, there's a certain substance to those rumors. At the same time, I accept without question the words of George Washington: to be prepared for war is one of the most effectual means of preserving the peace. Now, in spite of some things you may have heard, he didn't tell me that personally. Still, I'm in full agreement and believe that he did say it. But let me seriously speak about your employers. We've been through a period in which it seemed that we, the people, had forgotten that government is a convenience of, for, and by the people. And while we were busy with our own affairs, government began to grow beyond the consent of the governed. Its growth was nourished by an ever larger share of the people's earnings that it took by taxation, which became more and more confiscatory. At the same time, government neglected one of its prime responsibilities, national security, as it engaged more and more in social experimentation. Our margin of safety in an increasingly hostile world was allowed to diminish, and for a time it seemed that there was an erosion of respect for the honorable profession that you have chosen. All of this has led to an economic crisis. Deficit spending, an almost $1 trillion debt resulted in runaway inflation, lowered productivity, and great unemployment. And the tools of your trade were given a very low priority. Well, I'm happy to tell you that the people of America have recovered from what can only be called a temporary aberration. There is a spiritual revival going on in this country, a hunger on the part of the people to once again be proud of America, all that it is and all that it can be. Now, the first step in restoring our margin of safety must be the rejuvenation of our economy. A vibrant and expanding economy is necessary if we're to have the research, the technology, and the industry and capacity to provide you with what you need to practice your profession. Reflecting the will of the people, the government has returned to our long-time tradition of bipartisanship, not only where national security is concerned, but with regard to the economic needs of our people. In recent weeks,